Hello and welcome back to my next tutorial on Premiere Pro. So in the last ones we learned about setting up a sequence and a new project and a sequence in Premiere Pro, and we learned about basic editing in Premiere Pro and how to use the different tools and the timeline and the effects controls. And so just carrying straight on from the last one, so we had a bunch of shots on the timeline and a little text card there. So just a little bit more about the effects controls as they relate to text. So we've seen that with the text tool, we can write some text and then we can move it around on the screen. So if we want to change some of the controls for the text, they will appear up here in the effects controls, which is why I was showing you that in the last video. So you've got your graphics and then text will appear over here. So yeah, you can change things like the size of the font, right? So you don't want to try and do this. You want to change the font size in here with your controls. So you can go, okay, you want to make this bigger. Actually, it used to stretch the text when you did that. It looks like it doesn't anymore, so that's okay. Anyway, so you can change the font size in here if you want to make it bigger or smaller or whatever. Just put that back the way it was, 100%. You can change the font type. So I've got a bunch of fonts that I installed on here from DaFont, so I'm going to choose one of those. You can change it to make it bold or whatever you want to do to it. So that's what I'm going to do there. I'm going to make that a bit bigger, a bit bolder. You can center align it if you want, or not. And there's a bunch of other things here. So maybe you want to change the color of the text. So you can click on the fill, which is the color, and go, I want it to be blood red. There we go. Oh God, that looks awful. Why would you do that? Okay, and you can also change things like the stroke, which is the border around the text. We can't see it at the moment because it is white. So I will just click on that and go, okay, well, I want it to have a black border. There we go. It's a little bit hard to see, but it is there. You can make it bigger if you want with this control here. Oh, I've got a really ugly looking border around the shot now, but it does make it stand out against the background. That's what you would use that for. So I'm going to turn that off. You can also put in a background if you want, like that, which is basically like a flat color, which you could change. Oh, I want that to be bright red. Oh, that looks really terrible. Don't do that. So that's what the background control's for. That's the opacity for it. I'm not sure what that one is. We might want to have a play around with that. And the shadow. So you can give it I find that if you want text to stand out against a background, say with something that's maybe this one. Let's say we put that text there, and it's really hard to see because the background's quite light. So usually, I think the best way to do it is I mean, you can use a stroke if you want, yay, or a background, or you can use a shadow. I like to use a shadow because it's a bit more subtle, you know. So it basically puts in a shadow around the text. If I make it a bit more obvious, then you can see it, sort of. But it puts a little shadow around the text, which sort of helps it to stand out a bit more. There's a few controls for that. You can change the direction of it, and I'm not sure what that does. I think that's the width. There you go. You can see the shadow there. So you can change that, and I don't know what that one is. I think that's something. Anyway, you just hover your mouse over it. It'll tell you. That's the size of it. There you go. So those are the controls for your text, right? There's a few other ones there, like leading and kerning and some other stuff here. I don't know what all caps, all that stuff. So yeah, you can play around with your text and make it look good, right? So the most important thing with your text, in particular doing videos like this where it's like a bunch of montage shots, is to make sure that the text is readable. So now we always have it for something like this, we always have it in the lower thirds of the screen. So the lower thirds is basically this point down the bottom here, the lower thirds, and we want it to be, you know, nicely aligned so that it's on the screen but it's not too distracting from what we see. Here we go, wide shot. Still a little bit hard to read, but it's a bit better than it was. There's a few more buttons over the side here on the viewing window. Now there's one button in particular that I like to use, which is this one here called Safe Margins. And this is to do with text. So if you click on that one, it basically puts in these margins, and you can use those to align text. So you can go, okay, well I'm going to grab my text and I'm going to align it to these lines here, and that just helps to sort of line things up. You know, you can see exactly where the center of the shot is and where the middle of the width is, and go, okay, well that's where that's going to nicely align my text. Then you can turn that off if you want. So yeah, that's the Safe Margins button. There's a bunch of other buttons that you can import into here if you want, just by clicking this plus button. But the majority of these, in fact nearly all of them, you're not going to use at this point in the course, so don't worry too much about them. But they're there if you want to have a look around. Cool. So that is how to change the controls of the text. Cool. So yeah, I'm going to stop there, and the next one we're going to do, we're going to move on to a little bit of color correcting. Cool.